Welcome to Monk's Temple. Find a comfortable space and let your awareness settle gently into this moment. Many of us carry a quiet, familiar frustration, the gap between the life we plan and the life we live. If you've ever felt the spark of a New Year's resolution fade into the fog of daily demands, you understand this ache. Today, we explore a different path, rooted in a profound Buddhist insight. To truly achieve what matters, you must learn the art of doing less. This is not about laziness. It is about precision. We often mistake motion for progress, filling our days with activity yet feeling no closer to our core dreams. The problem isn't a lack of effort, but a misdirection of energy. Let me share a story about a woman named Clara. Clara dreamed of becoming a certified yoga teacher, a vision that felt deeply aligned with her spirit. Her approach was thorough. She mapped out a rigorous plan. Master 30 advanced poses, study anatomy texts, build a social media following to attract future clients, and assist at 3 local studios, all while maintaining her full-time job. Her calendar was a mosaic of colored blocks, a masterpiece of busyness. For a month, she was a dynamo, exhausted but driven. Then, she injured her shoulder attempting a complex posture without adequate rest. The physical pain was sharp, but the psychic pain was deeper. The dream now felt like a cruel taunt. Her plan, designed to build her up, had broken her down. She labeled herself, "I'm not disciplined enough. I don't have what it takes." In her defeat, she stopped everything. For 2 weeks, she simply rested. One afternoon, sitting quietly, a single question arose, stripped of all shoulds. What is the pure essence of why I want this? The answer was simple: to feel embodied peace, and to humbly share that feeling. Not followers, not certificates, not advanced poses. Just that. With her shoulder healing, she returned to her mat with one tiny directive: for 15 minutes each day, practice only gentle, foundational breathing and simple stretches. No goals, no photography, no metrics. Just presence with her body's whispers, not its achievements. This was doing less. Radically less. From that small, consistent, and deeply attentive practice, her understanding of yoga transformed. It became a dialogue, not a domination. A year later, not only was she injury-free, but her authentic, calm presence during those 15 minutes naturally drew the attention of a local teacher who offered her a genuine apprenticeship. Her path unfolded not from a frantic chase, but from a quiet, essential return. If Clara's story resonates, if your own dreams feel burdened by complicated plans, you've found a sanctuary. Here at Monk's Temple, we explore such liberating shifts. Consider subscribing. Let this be a gentle reminder in your daily feed that a simpler, more focused way is always available. Clara's experience reveals what Buddhism calls upadana, clinging. We cling not just to outcomes, but to identities as doers, to the cultural script that says our worth is measured by our output. The Buddha's path involves viveka, discernment, the mental act of separating the vital from the trivial. Your vital priority is often a quiet whisper beneath the roar of urgent but unimportant tasks. It is the gold buried in gravel. Think of your attention as a beam of light from a single lighthouse. Society encourages you to spin wildly, illuminating everything in a frantic, 360-degree blur. The shore remains dark, and ships cannot find their way. Doing less is the courageous act of stopping the spin. It is choosing one true direction, your North Star, and holding the beam steady. Yes, most of the sea remains in darkness. But the one ship that matters, carrying your deepest intention, now has a clear path to shore. You guide it home not by frantic activity, but by focused, unwavering attention. This focused beam requires us to confront a seductive myth, the belief that more input guarantees more output. Buddhist psychology understands karma as intentional action. An action born of clarity and compassion plants a seed with tremendous potential. An action born of fear, scarcity, and fragmentation sows a weak seed, no matter how energetically you scatter it. Doing less is about cultivating the quality of your action, not inflating the quantity. It is planting one potent seed in fertile soil and tending it patiently, rather than exhausting yourself scattering handfuls on stone. We often avoid this focus because stillness feels vulnerable. When we stop the frantic spinning, we must face the question, without all this doing, who am I? Buddhism guides us to find our identity in awareness itself, in the capacity to be present, compassionate, and awake. When you rest in that being, action naturally arises from fullness, not from a desperate need to prove you exist. This is the first step on the path, the radical, countercultural move of intentional reduction. It is not an end, but a beginning. It clears the space so you can see what is truly there. In the space we've just cleared together, another major obstacle often becomes visible, the towering, often painful, architecture of our expectations. That is where we will turn next. I will pause here. When you are ready to continue, to explore how to build bridges instead of walls with your expectations, simply let me know. Now, we turn to a force that often silently sabotages even our most focused efforts, the architecture of our expectations. We've spoken about the power of doing less, of honing your attention to a single, essential point. But that point can be obscured not by distraction, but by the lens through which we view it, a lens clouded by what we demand of the future. Buddhist wisdom offers a clarifying insight here. True progress is found not in the absence of hope, but in the middle ground between rigid demand and passive resignation. This is the middle way of expectation. To expect is human. It is the mind's natural projection, a story we tell about tomorrow. The problem arises not when we have a direction, but when we confuse our sketched map with the actual, living territory. We build a detailed model in our mind, of how a project will unfold, how a relationship will feel, how our success will look, and then we step into the messy, unpredictable world of reality. When these two things fail to align, which they always do, we don't just experience disappointment. We experience a betrayal of our own story. The pain is less about the event and more about the shattering of the fragile crystal palace we built in our imagination. Consider the story of Anya. Anya was a dedicated teacher who carried a beautiful, heavy expectation. She believed that to be good, she must reach every single student, every single day, with transformative clarity. She envisioned a classroom of constant engagement, where each lesson landed perfectly and light bulbs of understanding illuminated every face. Her reality was, of course, a human classroom, a mix of off days, distractions, complex home lives, and the beautiful, uneven rhythm of learning. When a lesson fell flat or a student struggled, Anya didn't just see a pedagogical challenge. She saw a personal failing. The gap between her ideal, the perfect, resonant lesson, and the reality, the messy, human process, became a chasm she blamed herself for. I'm not inspiring enough. I'm failing them. The expectation, meant to motivate, became a whip. She was exhausted, not by the work of teaching, but by the weight of the story she carried about what teaching should be. What Anya encountered is described in Buddhism as a form of upadana, clinging. Here, she was clinging to a specific outcome, an idealized image. This creates dukkha, suffering, because all conditioned things are impermanent, anicca. A classroom moment, a student's mood, her own energy, all are in constant flux. A rigid expectation is a fight against this fundamental law of life. The suffering is then compounded by ditthi, a wrong view of self. I am a failure. This identity, born from a story about a gap, becomes a prison far more confining than any single unmet goal. Anya's liberation began not with a new teaching technique, but with a shift in expectation. It came during a meeting with a mentor who said, "Your job is not to be the sun, forcing every plant to grow. Your job is to be the gardener, to tend the soil, provide water, and pull the weeds. Some plants will bloom today, some next month, some in a year you may never see. Your faithfulness is to the tending, not to the blooming." This reframing was seismic. It moved her from a rigid outcome, all students must get it now, to a moderate intention, I will create a nourishing environment and teach with clarity. Her new, moderate expectation was, today, I will connect authentically with at least one student, and I will deliver the material with care. Some days, that one connection was profound. Other days, it was a simple smile. But she was meeting her own expectation constantly. The crushing weight lifted. The classroom didn't suddenly become perfect, but her relationship to it transformed. She was no longer a failure failing at an impossible task, she was a gardener, faithfully tending her plot. The students, sensing her newfound peace, began to relax and engage more deeply. The very quality she sought, inspiration, began to emanate from her presence, not from her frantic striving to meet a phantom ideal. This is the practice of upekkha, equanimity. It is the balanced heart that engages fully but without demanding a specific return. Think of it as the difference between throwing a boomerang and planting a seed. When you throw a boomerang with a rigid expectation, you stand there waiting for it to return exactly to your hand, in exactly the way you pictured. You grow anxious with every micro-shift in the wind. If it falls short, you feel you failed. Planting a seed with a moderate expectation is different. You do the work. You find good soil, you water it, you ensure sunlight. You hold the intention for growth. But you do not stand over it demanding to see the stem by Tuesday. You trust the process. You understand that your part and nature's part are in partnership. The result may not look exactly as you imagined, the flower may be a different shade, but it will be real, and it will be rooted. Moderate expectation is this kind of faithful planting. Our culture, however, glorifies the boomerang throw. It sells us the precise arc, the perfect catch. We are taught to visualize the outcome in such granular detail that the living, breathing, unpredictable journey becomes an obstacle to our predetermined destination. We become travelers who hate the road. The middle way asks us to love the road, the actual ground beneath our feet, while keeping a general direction in mind. It asks us to hold our dreams like a bird in our hands. With enough care that it feels supported, but with an open enough grip that it can breathe, flutter, and retain its wild nature to fly its own path. When we fail to do this, and our high expectations crash, we often perform a dangerous alchemy, we turn an event into an identity. I didn't reach my sales target becomes, I am not a salesperson. My relationship ended becomes, I am unlovable. This is the opposite of the Buddhist teaching of anatta, or not self, which points to the fluid, process-driven nature of existence. You are not a fixed noun, a failure. You are a verb, a process of learning, trying, feeling, adjusting. When you rest in this understanding, disappointment becomes informative feedback, not a life sentence. It is a cloud passing through the vast sky of your awareness, not a stain on its fabric. So, we begin to cultivate moderate expectations by practicing mindful awareness of our own stories. The next time you feel the sting of disappointment, pause. Gently inquire, what was the exact, hidden demand I placed on this situation or person? Then, practice discernment. Separate the pure, beautiful intention, I want to be a caring teacher, from the rigid, specific requirement, every student must be visibly inspired every day. Honor the intention. Soften the requirement into an intention for your own action, I will teach with care today. This small shift in internal language moves you from the tyranny of a fixed future to the freedom of a meaningful present. We have now laid a second stone on the path, the stone of moderate expectation, which allows us to walk without the heavy burden of predetermined outcomes. With a clearer mind from doing less, and a lighter heart from expecting moderately, we create the ideal inner environment. Now, we are ready to address the most practical question of all: how does change, real, lasting transformation, actually occur? The answer is deceptively simple, and it forms our third pillar. I will pause here. When you are ready to continue, to explore the astonishing, cumulative power of the nearly invisible shift, simply let me know. We now turn to the quiet heart of transformation. We have cleared space by focusing on less, and we have softened our gaze by moderating expectations. But a critical question remains: how does growth actually happen? How does the shift from where we are to where we wish to be truly occur? The Buddha's path provides a deceptively simple, yet radically powerful answer, through the accumulation of tiny, almost imperceptible changes. This is the third pillar of our journey, the profound discipline of the small step. We live in a culture obsessed with the breakthrough narrative. The overnight success, the dramatic turnaround, the moment of epic willpower that changes everything. We are taught to admire the earthquake, ignoring the patient work of the root that slowly cracks the stone. We stand at the foot of our personal mountain and pray for a helicopter to the summit, scorning the simple, sacred act of taking the first step. But Buddhism is a path of bhavana, of cultivation. Enlightenment itself is described not as a sudden gift, but as the fruit of gradual, mindful training. Your deepest personal change follows this same, gentle law. Let's consider the story of Leo. Leo was perpetually overwhelmed by the clutter in his home, which mirrored the clutter in his mind. His dream was a serene, minimalist living space, a sanctuary. His previous attempts were grand, weekend-long purges. He would empty entire rooms into piles, only to become paralyzed by the sheer volume of decisions. Exhausted and surrounded by chaos, he would shove everything back into closets, feeling defeated and ashamed. The monumental goal, a perfectly organized home, was so distant that the mere thought of it drained his energy before he began. He was trying to lift the entire mountain in one heave. His shift came from surrendering the grand plan. He adopted a rule so simple it seemed trivial. One thing a day. Each evening, before bed, he would identify exactly one object in his home that was unused, unloved, or unnecessary. A single expired spice jar from the cabinet. One lonely sock with no match. A broken pen from the drawer. He would then dispose of it, donate it, or return it to its proper home. That was it. The entire ritual took less than 2 minutes. Some days, that was all he did. Other days, removing that one item made the space around it look so clearly askew that he'd naturally put away 2 or 3 other things. But the commitment was only to the one. There was no fanfare, no marathon sessions, no guilt. After a month, he couldn't point to a dramatic difference. But he felt lighter. After 3 months, guests remarked that his home felt calm. After a year, he lived in the sanctuary he'd imagined. The transformation was so gradual it was bloodless. He never fought a battle with clutter. He simply disbanded its army, one surrendered soldier each day. He achieved his monumental change not through a violent revolution, but through a quiet, persistent succession of tiny acts. Leo's experience embodies a deep principle from the Buddhist teachings, the law of pratyaya samutpada, or dependent origination. Nothing exists independently, everything arises based on causes and conditions. A massive, beautiful result, a serene life, does not require a single, massive cause. It can be the eventual, inevitable outcome of a long chain of small, wholesome conditions. Removing one expired spice jar is a new condition. It creates a slightly more orderly cabinet, which fosters a calmer mind when cooking, which makes cooking more likely, which supports healthier eating, which improves energy, and so the chain continues. You are not building a cathedral in a day. You are laying one brick, with care, each sunrise. One day you look up, and the sanctuary is standing, having been built breath by breath, brick by brick. Let's use a new metaphor, the mosaic of mastery. We look at a stunning mosaic, a vast, intricate portrait made of thousands of tiny, colored tiles. From a distance, it appears as a single, grand image. But up close, you see its true nature, a collection of individual, simple pieces. Your dream life is that grand image. We mistakenly believe we must paint it in one stroke, leading to frustration when we can't. The mosaic mindset understands that you only need to place one true tile today. The tile of going to bed 10 minutes earlier. The tile of speaking one sentence of kindness. The tile of completing one small task without resentment. Each tile seems insignificant alone. But you are not working on the portrait, you are working on the tile. Your faithfulness is to the placement, not to the finished picture. The portrait emerges, in time, as the divine sum of your daily, tiny fidelities. This approach is an act of supreme compassion toward yourself, a practice of ahimsa or non-harm. Attacking yourself for not achieving a huge change is internal violence. It burns your energy and breeds shame. Inviting yourself to make one tiny, manageable change is an act of kindness. It respects your human limits and works with your psychology, not against it. Willpower is not a bottomless well. It is a shallow cup. A grand gesture demands you drink the entire cup dry at once, leaving you parched and helpless. A tiny change requires only a sip. It leaves you with reserves. Success in that tiny act provides a droplet of satisfaction, a positive reinforcement, that actually refills the cup a little for the next effort. The practical application is therefore an exercise in radical humility. Look at any area where you feel stuck. Now, define the very first, smallest possible action that would move you 1 millimeter in the right direction. Make it so small that your critical mind scoffs, "That's nothing. That won't matter." That is your perfect starting point. Want to run a marathon? Start by tying your running shoes and standing outside for 1 minute. Want to learn guitar? Start by holding it for 5 minutes today. Want more peace? Start by pouring a glass of water and drinking it slowly, without distraction. The smallness is the magic. It disarms fear. It builds the unshakable muscle of consistency, which is infinitely more powerful than the fleeting spasm of intensity. This is the wisdom of little by little. It is the way a river carves a canyon not through force, but through persistent presence. It is how the Buddha said a wise person removes their own impurities, gradually, patiently, from moment to moment. You are not failing if you only place one tile today. You are succeeding perfectly at the only part of the process that is ever under your control, this single, present moment action. We have now placed the third cornerstone. The transformative power of incremental, tiny changes. With these three, the focus on the essential, the balance of moderate hope, and the faith in small steps, we have a complete framework. Yet, a framework is a map. The terrain of life is lived in weather, in storms of emotion, in droughts of motivation, in the fog of doubt. To walk this map, we need an inner compass. We need to cultivate the specific qualities of heart and mind that allow us to continue placing our one tile, even when we cannot see the emerging portrait. I will pause here. When you are ready to continue, to explore the inner qualities that make this path not just understood but livable, simply let me know. We have our framework: focus on the essential, hold expectations lightly, and move in small steps. But a blueprint is not a home. To live within this structure, we must develop the inner qualities that make it not just a philosophy, but a lived reality. This part of our journey turns inward, to the cultivation of the heart and mind. It is about building the inner compass that guides you when the path grows faint. Buddha's teachings offer specific, trainable qualities that are the very engine of this way of being. The first of these is patient perseverance, or khanti. This is not passive waiting. It is the active, enduring courage to continue your tiny, correct action even when no visible result appears. Our modern world is allergic to this. We crave instant feedback, quick fixes, and visible metrics of success. Khanti is the wisdom of the deep root. Imagine a lotus seed resting in the mud at the bottom of a pond. For seasons, to anyone looking at the surface, nothing is happening. The seed is simply being a seed in the dark. But within that patient being, it is absorbing nutrients, preparing, aligning itself with the laws of growth. One day, a green shoot will spear toward the distant sun, and eventually a stunning bloom will unfold on the surface. The bloom gets all the attention, but it was the patient perseverance in the dark that made it possible. Your daily tiny step is that seed in the mud. Khanti is your faith in the unseen process, your willingness to be in the dark phase without digging up the seed every day to check for a flower. Consider the story of Sam, who decided to learn a new language later in life. His goal was conversational fluency. He began with grand plans, hour-long daily lessons, grammar deep dives, vocabulary cramming. It was unsustainable, and he quit within weeks, labeling himself not a language person. Years later, he approached it differently, armed with the principle of tiny steps. His new commitment, Listen to one 3-minute podcast in the target language each day while making his morning coffee. That's all. No pressure to understand, no note-taking. Just listening. Some days he caught a word, most days it was just sound. For months, there was no visible progress. This was the mud phase. But he practiced Conti. He showed up for his 3 minutes, day after day, trusting the process. Then, almost a year in, he was in a market and heard 2 tourists speaking that language. To his own astonishment, he understood the gist of their conversation about the price of fruit. The flour had broken the surface. That moment of recognition was not the result of a heroic effort that morning, it was the cumulative fruit of hundreds of invisible days of patient listening. Conti had carried him through the unglamorous middle where most of us give up. The second indispensable quality is self-compassion, or applying metta, loving kindness, to yourself. The path of small steps is not a straight line. You will miss a day. You will have a week where every tiny action feels like lifting a boulder. The critical voice will rise, you're failing. You're inconsistent. This proves you can't change. This voice is not a truth teller, it is a saboteur. Self-compassion is the practice of disarming it. It means meeting your own struggle not with a whip, but with the same kindness you'd offer a struggling friend. It is the shift from, "Why am I so weak?" to, "This is really hard for me right now. What do I need?" Let's build a metaphor, the inner sanctuary. Imagine your commitment to your small steps is like tending a small, quiet room within yourself, a sanctuary of peace and intention. One day, life happens. You're stressed, overwhelmed, and you forget to tend it. The voice of condemnation storms in, throwing open the windows, letting in a cold wind, and shouting about the dust. It makes the sanctuary feel violated and inhospitable, so you stay away even longer. Self-compassion approaches differently. It sees the dust and the cold air, but it enters quietly. It closes the windows, lights a small candle of acknowledgement, and says softly, "It's okay. Let's just sit here together for a moment. We can clean up tomorrow." It repairs the relationship with the sanctuary itself, making it safe for you to return. Without self-compassion, one missed step becomes a reason to abandon the path. With it, a missed step is simply a reminder to gently find your way back. The third guiding quality is mindful awareness, or sati. This is the clear, non-judgmental observation of your present moment experience. It is the tool that allows you to see the difference between a real obstacle and a mental story about an obstacle. When the thought arises, "I'm too tired to do my one small thing," sati allows you to see that as a thought, not a fact. You can note, there is the feeling of fatigue. There is the thought that this is pointless. This creates a crucial gap between stimulus and response. In that gap, you have a choice. You can choose, from a place of clarity, to do a smaller version of the thing, perhaps just setting up your yoga mat and standing on it for one breath instead of a full session. Sati prevents you from being hijacked by passing weather in your mind. It allows you to keep your hand on the compass even in a storm. Think of your mind as a sky. Thoughts, emotions, and urges are clouds, some light, some dark, some stormy. Without sati, you believe you are the cloud. If a dark cloud of "I can't" rolls in, you become the person who can't. With sati, you recognize you are the sky itself, vast, aware, and capable of holding all clouds without being defined by them. The dark cloud may still be there, but you can see its edges, you can watch it pass, and you can still take a small step under its shadow. This is how you maintain agency even on difficult days. Together, these three, patient perseverance, self-compassion, and mindful awareness, form the inner ecology that sustains growth. They are the soil, water, and sunlight for the seed of your tiny steps. You cultivate them not by adding another task, but by bringing a certain quality of attention to the tasks you already have. When you feel impatient, acknowledge it with sati, soothe it with self-compassion, and return to the work with khanti. This is the inner work that makes the outer work possible. With this inner compass calibrated, you are no longer a fair-weather traveler on this path. You have the tools to continue in fog, rain, or stillness. But our lives are not lived in meditation caves. We exist in a web of relationships, obligations, and external noise. How do we practice this focused, gentle way of being when the world seems to demand the opposite: more speed, more noise, more reaction? This brings us to the vital art of integration. I will pause here. When you are ready to continue, to explore how to carry this sanctuary of mind into the bustling marketplace of daily life, simply let me know. Our journey now turns outward. We have cultivated an inner sanctuary through focus, balanced expectations, tiny steps, and a compassionate, patient awareness. But life is not lived in a vacuum. We must step from the quiet of the meditation cushion into the bustling marketplace of our days, into jobs, families, and a world that often seems to celebrate the very opposite of what we're practicing. This is the art of integration. How to carry the quiet clarity of Monk's Temple into the noise of the world without being overwhelmed or losing your way. This is where wisdom meets application in the most practical sense. A core Buddhist concept that guides this integration is samatha, often translated as calmness or tranquility. But samatha is not a state you achieve only in silence. It is a quality of mind you can carry with you, like an inner anchor. It is the practice of maintaining a center of calm while the external world swirls. The challenge isn't to avoid the swirl, it's to not become the swirl yourself. Let me tell you about a woman named Lena. Lena was a project manager in a fast-paced tech startup, an environment of constant urgency, shifting deadlines, and abrupt video calls. Her old mode was total immersion. She'd sync her nervous system to the office chaos, reacting instantly to every ping, her heart rate spiking with each new email. She was effective but perpetually drained, and her dream of a peaceful, creative personal life felt like a fantasy from another universe. She'd come home buzzing with anxious energy, unable to settle into the tiny, gentle steps she wanted for herself. Her integration began with a single, tiny ritual at a threshold. She decided that the moment she closed her laptop at the end of the workday, she would place both palms flat on her desk, take 3 conscious breaths, and silently say, "Work is complete." This 15-second ritual was her act of samatha, a deliberate, somatic pause to create a boundary. It was a signal to her body and mind, the storm of that reality is now over. We are crossing into different weather. At first, the anxious thoughts of work would follow her home anyway. But she persisted with the ritual, not as a magic spell to erase thoughts, but as a faithful anchor point. Over time, those 3 breaths became a powerful psychological airlock. They didn't stop the external demands, but they changed her internal relationship to them. She began to carry the calm of those 3 breaths into her workday, using them before answering a stressful message. She was learning to be in the storm without being made of storm. Lena's story illustrates that integration is not about building a wall between your peaceful self and the chaotic world. It is about developing a portable sanctuary, a practiced inner posture you can assume anywhere. The 3 breaths at the desk, the conscious sip of water before a meeting, the feeling of your feet on the floor while in a crowded room, these are the threads with which you weave a cloak of calm you can wear anywhere. This leads us to a vital skill for integration. Discernment in communication, or samavaka, right speech. The world often pulls us into dramas, complaints, and urgent, unfocused conversations. To maintain your focus on the essential, you must learn to engage with speech that is truthful, helpful, and timely, and to gracefully disengage from speech that is not. This isn't about being aloof, it's about conserving your most precious resource, your attentive energy, for what truly nourishes you and others. Imagine your daily energy as a clear, clean water in a pitcher. Every interaction is a cup you pour from. Gossip, compulsive complaining, and reactive arguments are like pouring that water onto barren, thirsty sand. It disappears, leaving nothing fertile behind. A focused, kind, or meaningful conversation is like watering a specific plant. It feeds something. Integration involves consciously choosing, more and more, where you pour your water. It might mean politely exiting a circular, negative conversation. It might mean pausing before replying to a provocative message. It is using speech not just to react to the world, but to consciously shape your environment toward peace. Now, let's consider a new metaphor, the deep sea diver. The surface of the ocean is the world of daily chaos, the waves of news, social media, opinions, and demands. They are loud and powerful. If you live only on the surface, you are tossed by every wave. Integration is the practice of developing the weight belt and oxygen tank of your inner practice, so you can consciously dive below the turbulent surface. At depth, there is a profound quiet and stability. The waves still exist above, but they are a distant rumble. From this deep, calm place, you can observe the surface storms without being in them. You can then ascend when you need to engage, but you always know how to return to the depth to replenish your calm. Your tiny daily practices are what build your capacity to dive and sustain you at depth. But what about the people in our lives who rely on us? Here, integration meets another Buddhist principle, karuna, or compassion. Doing less does not mean neglecting your responsibilities. It means fulfilling them from a different place. It is the difference between helping your child with homework while your mind is frantic with your own to-do list, doing more, in a scattered way, and giving them your full, calm attention for 20 focused minutes, doing less, but with profound presence. The action may be the same, the quality of mind transforms it. Your loved ones don't need the ghost of you who is physically present but mentally racing. They need the real you, fully there, even if for a shorter, bounded time. Integrating your practice means gifting your presence, not just your proximity. Finally, integration requires intentional space. You must fiercely guard the white space in your calendar, the gaps that allow for the tiny steps, the 3 breaths, the silent diving. This is not selfish, it is strategic and compassionate. A musician cannot play beautiful music if the score is solid black notes with no rests. The rests are part of the music. Your unscheduled time is the rest note that allows the melody of your focused action to be heard clearly. This means learning to say no gracefully to non-essential requests, not as a rejection of others, but as a confirmation of your commitment to your essential path. To integrate is to become like a mountain. The weather of the world, the winds of criticism, the rains of obligation, the sun of praise, changes constantly on the surface. But the mountain remains, grounded in its own deep stability. It does not chase the weather or begrudge it. It allows all weather to pass over its slopes. Your practices are what root you into your own mountainess. From that stable place, you can respond to the world effectively, rather than reacting from a place of being buffeted by it. We have now explored how to carry this way of being into the stream of daily life. Yet, even with the best integration, there will be times of significant challenge, loss, or disorientation, times when the path seems to vanish entirely. How do we apply these principles not just to building a dream, but to navigating a breakdown? This is our next, and deeply important, exploration. I will pause here. When you are ready to continue, to discover how the tools of less, moderation, and small steps become anchors in life's storms, simply let me know. We've explored building and maintaining a wise path. But life's terrain includes deep valleys of loss, failure, and disorientation. What happens when the goal itself vanishes? When a job disappears, a relationship ends, or health fails. In these moments, our framework is tested not as a ladder for climbing, but as a shelter for surviving. This is where our principles reveal their deepest power. They are not merely tools for achievement, but for endurance. They become a way to navigate the storm when all maps are lost. The first instinct in crisis is often frantic action, to do more, to fix, replace, or escape the pain. This is the mind's attempt to reject the unacceptable reality. Yet, this struggle often magnifies the suffering, adding exhaustion and panic to the original pain. The Buddhist teaching of the First Noble Truth, dukkha, directly acknowledges this: suffering is part of life. The wisdom lies not in denial, but in a profound shift of response. Here, doing less transforms from a strategy of focus into a practice of radical allowance. It means ceasing the inner war against what is. You stop arguing with reality. This is the ultimate subtraction, removing the added agony of your own resistance. Consider the story of Anya. Anya was a community organizer whose life's work was a vibrant neighborhood center. After a decade, funding evaporated, and the center closed permanently. Her identity, purpose, and daily rhythm were shattered. Her initial response was a frenzy of doing more. Writing frantic grant proposals, launching desperate fundraising campaigns, working 18-hour days to save the unsavable. This burnout only deepened her despair, confirming her story of total failure. The shift came the day she physically could not get out of bed, overwhelmed by grief. Lying there, she heard rain against the window, a steady, neutral rhythm. She had a sudden, clear thought: I am fighting a tide that has already come in. In that moment, she surrendered. She let the reality of the loss be true. This was doing less. She stopped the campaign to resurrect the past. For the first week, her only goal was to walk to her porch each morning and sit for 5 minutes, feeling the air. That was her tiny step, a minute act of being present with a world that still existed. It wasn't rebuilding, it was remembering how to be alive. From that tiny, anchored practice, a sliver of space opened. Months later, from that space, she began volunteering 1 hour a week at a city garden, simply pulling weeds with no agenda. It was a small, quiet action that connected her to growth without the weight of an outcome. A new, different form of community work eventually grew from that quiet place, but that was an unlooked-for gift. In the depths, her practice was simply to allow the breakdown and perform one microscopic act of connection to life. Anya's journey shows that in crisis, moderate expectations must be simplified to fundamental expectations. The goal is not progress, but preservation. The expectation becomes, today, I will be gentle. I will meet my most basic needs. I will not abandon myself. The small step becomes elemental: drink water. Step outside. Speak one kind word to yourself. These are not small. In the landscape of grief, they are heroic. They are the first, fragile threads of a new web. In these seasons, the inner qualities we've cultivated become lifelines. Patient perseverance, Kanti, is now the courage to endure this hour, this wave of sorrow. Self-compassion, Metta, is the vital voice that says, this hurts, and it's okay that it hurts, replacing the voice of blame. Mindful awareness, Sati, lets you observe the storm of panic and sadness as passing weather within your awareness, not as the definition of your future. You learn to be the valley that holds the floodwaters, trusting they will eventually recede. Let's envision a metaphor for this state, the deep water anchor. When a ship is in a fierce surface storm, the waves are monstrous. If it tries to run or fight the waves directly, it can be swamped or capsized. The seasoned captain's move is sometimes to deploy a deep water anchor. This doesn't stop the storm, but it keeps the ship from being driven onto the rocks. It allows the vessel to weather the tempest by connecting it to the profound stillness that always exists far below the turbulent surface. Your practice in crisis is to deploy your anchor, your breath, your tiny ritual, your mantra of kindness. It doesn't stop the pain, but it prevents you from being shattered against the rocks of despair or destructive action. You are held, even while being tossed. In a breakdown, our definition of success must be entirely rewritten. Success is no longer forward motion. Success is faithful presence. It is getting through the day without adding self-hatred to your pain. It is the moment you choose rest over punishment, a deep breath over a spiral of worry. A day where you acknowledged your humanity is a day of profound triumph. This reframing is a mercy. It removes the oppressive demand for a comeback story and honors the sacred, necessary time of healing, which is invisible, slow, and inward. The Buddhist concept of anicca, impermanence, is a stark comfort here. It assures us that even this, especially this, will change. The intensity will soften. The landscape of your life will not look the same, but the storm will pass. Your practice is to learn the art of being still within it, to find the eye of the hurricane where a strange peace exists, the peace of no longer struggling. Therefore, applying our principles in a valley looks like this. 1. Do less, stop the inner fight. Allow the feelings. Let the breakdown be. Conserve energy by ending the mental battle. 2. Expect the minimal, release all timelines for healing. Hold only the expectation of elemental self-care, nourishment, rest, minimal kindness. 3. Take atomic steps. Reduce action to the most basic, physical act of care. Stand up. Open a window. Make a simple meal. These are your anchors. This is how you endure. And from the fertile ground of that endured suffering, tended by patience and compassion, new green shoots will eventually emerge. They will be different from what came before, because the ground itself has been changed. We have now seen how these teachings serve not only in construction but in consolation. They are for the full human journey. This understanding allows us to step back and view our life not as a project to be perfected, but as a landscape to be traveled with wisdom. With this whole view, we are ready for the final integration, making this a lifelong path, not a temporary fix. I will pause here. When you are ready to continue, to see how these threads weave into the fabric of a complete life, simply let me know. We have journeyed from the clarity of focused beginnings, through the storms of breakdown, and seen how our principles hold. Now, we arrive at the final integration. Making this not a technique for a season, but the very way we walk through our entire life. This is about moving from practice to praxis, from doing these things to living from this place. It is the shift from being a traveler who occasionally checks a map, to becoming the mapmaker, whose every step is informed by a deeper orientation. The ultimate aim is not to achieve a final, perfect state of being. That is another hidden expectation, another monument to build. The aim, deeply rooted in Buddhist wisdom, is to cultivate a way of seeing and being that is flexible, resilient, and compassionate through all of life's chapters. It is to develop what we might call beginner's mind for the long journey, a willingness to meet each new phase, whether of building or breaking down, with the same core tools, less, moderate, small. This requires a subtle but profound shift in identity. We must stop identifying as the person who has goals, the achiever, the striver, and start identifying as the person who engages wisely with the process of living, the gardener, the witness, the compassionate presence. Your value is no longer tied to the outcome of your efforts, but to the quality of your attention within them. This is the essence of anatta, or not self, releasing the fixed story of who you are supposed to be, and resting in the dynamic, aware process of being itself. Let's consider a final story, about a man named Eli. Eli had practiced these principles for years, using them to build a career, navigate a divorce, and find new passions. In his late 60s, he faced the universal transition of retirement. This wasn't a crisis, but a profound change of rhythm and identity. The old goals were complete. The societal script was blank. His friends fell into two camps. Those who frantically filled calendars with new projects, a form of doing more to escape the void, and those who collapsed into lethargy and regret. Eli did neither. He applied the framework to the transition itself. First, he consciously did less. He declined immediate commitments, allowing for a spacious, empty time he called the clearing. Second, he held moderate expectations. He didn't demand that this next phase have a grand purpose or title. His expectation was simply to be curious and kind each day. Third, he took a tiny step. His small action was to sit in his clearing each morning with a notebook and write one observation, a bird at the feeder, a memory, a fleeting feeling. No agenda. From that consistent, tiny act of attentive presence, his authentic next chapter began to whisper to him. The observations led to short essays. The essays led to a quiet desire to share them with a local senior center. Without a grand plan, he found himself facilitating a writing group, not as a teacher, but as a fellow traveler. His retirement became not an end, but a gentle turning into a new, unscripted form of contribution, born from presence, not pressure. Eli's story shows that when the principles become your way of life, you don't face transitions, you dance with them. You allow the ending, create a mindful pause, and let the next beginning emerge from small, authentic gestures. To make this your lifelong path, we can think of it as tending 3 perpetual gardens. 1. The garden of attention. This is where you practice doing less. Daily, you weed out distractions and non-essential commitments. You continually ask, does this truly matter? This garden requires regular tending, as new weeds of obligation always sprout. 2. The garden of the heart. This is where you practice moderate expectations. Here, you cultivate equanimity, upekkha. You plant seeds of intention, but you do not chain yourself to demanding specific blooms. You learn to appreciate the garden in all its seasons, the budding, the blooming, the withering, the fallow rest. 3. The garden of action. This is where you practice tiny steps. You plant one seed at a time. You water it faithfully. You understand that your role is not to force growth, but to provide consistent, gentle care and then to trust. Life, then, becomes the art of walking among these 3 gardens each day, tending each a little. Some days you only have energy to pull one weed in the garden of attention. Other days, you might plant a few more seeds in the garden of action. The point is not perfection in all 3, but faithful visitation. The fruit of this lifelong cultivation is a quality the Buddha placed at the end of the Noble Eightfold Path, Samma Samadhi, or right concentration. This is often thought of as deep meditation, but it can also be understood as unified presence. It is the state where your attention, doing less, your heart, moderate expectation, and your action, tiny step, are all aligned in a single, present moment flow. You are not scattered, regretful, or anxious. You are wholly here, doing what you are doing, because you have chosen it from a place of clarity. Whether you are washing a dish, comforting a friend, or working on a project, you are in your life, not apart from it, wishing for another. This is the true achievement, a life lived in integrity, moment by moment. The big, external achievements may or may not come, but they become secondary to the primary experience of a unified, conscious presence. You achieve the ultimate goal of Buddhism, the end of dukkha or suffering. Not by acquiring everything you want, but by changing your relationship to wanting, doing, and being. You find peace not at the finish line of a race you've stopped running, but in the quality of your stride, however slow, however the path turns. We have now come to the synthesis of all we've explored. From this vantage point, we can look back at the entire journey, the plans, the failures, the storms, the quiet mornings, and see it all as the beautiful, necessary curriculum for learning this unified way of being. There is nothing to reject, only wisdom to integrate. I will pause here. When you are ready for our final part, a closing contemplation to weave these truths into your heart for the road ahead, simply let me know. We have reached the end of our spoken journey, but this is truly where your own path begins. We've traveled from the noise of endless doing to the quiet power of less. We've softened the rigid walls of expectation into open windows of intention. We've discovered the monumental strength hidden within the smallest, most faithful step. These are not merely strategies. They are a way of seeing. A way of being. They are the gentle tools with which you can sculpt a life of meaning from the raw material of your days, not by force, but by attention. This is the heart of the Buddha's wisdom. Transformation occurs not through grand gestures of will, but through the patient, compassionate realignment of your moment-to-moment attention. So, as we close, I invite you into a final, simple contemplation. A way to carry this from the realm of ideas into the quiet certainty of your heart. Find a comfortable posture. Let your eyes soften or close. Bring your awareness to your breath, not to change it, but to know it. The gentle rise, and the gentle fall. Now, bring to mind the one thing that feels most essential in your life right now. Not a list. One thing. Feel its essence, not its details. See it as a single, steady light in your inner landscape. Around that light, see the clutter, the noise, the unimportant tasks and worries that have gathered like dust. One by one, with your exhale, imagine gently blowing that dust away. You are not destroying anything. You are simply clearing space so the light can shine more clearly. This is the practice of doing less. Feel the relief of that space. Now, turn toward that essential light. Feel any tight grip of expectation you have around it, how it must look, or grow, or manifest. With your next inhale, imagine loosening that grip. Open your hands. Let the light be what it is. Offer it only your sincere care, not your demands. This is the practice of moderate expectation. Feel the peace of that release. Finally, from this place of clear space and open hands, ask. What is the one, tiny, almost effortless action I can take today to honor this light? Let the answer arise. It may be as simple as a thought of gratitude, a single sentence written, a 5-minute walk, a moment of silence. See yourself performing this small act with complete presence. This is the practice of the tiny step. Feel the dignity and sufficiency of that single action. Know that this clear space, this open heart, this small step, is enough. It is more than enough. It is the complete practice for today. The entire journey is made of days like this. When you are ready, gently return your awareness to the room. Carry this feeling of gentle sufficiency with you. From all of us here at Monk's Temple, this is our wish for you. May you have the courage to do less of what does not matter. May you have the wisdom to expect just enough. May you have the patience to trust the smallest step. And through this, may you discover that the peace you seek has been here all along, in the simple, profound act of being fully alive to this moment, and then the next. Thank you for walking this path with us.